podcast, Picks and Perspective with Chris Johnson. Palpable paradox.
Taking a lot of time to really see what matters, you know? I feel like this has been a time to grow. And I feel like a lot of people, obviously it's extremely tragic, but a lot of people are really kind of taking stock and they're kind of looking inward and they're trying to develop themselves. And I appreciate the time and the kind of opportunity to really slow down and try to make yourself a better person, make myself a better musician too.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, you're right. It's like there's so much tragedy in the situation. At the same time, that's always an opportunity to look at what's not working and reapproach life and see how I can level up, see how I can be, if nothing else, maybe you're fine. I mean, I think for myself, I'm finding out that there's so much things that I was doing that were kind of frivolous things, not exactly necessary or meaningful. Yeah.
Yeah, I started when the pandemic hit. It's just like waves of different kinds of feelings, trying to process the lack of socializing. In my neighborhood in East Atlanta, I would go out to shows every other day. So I always think about, like Erykah Badu said, that sometimes you need to upload, sometimes you need to download. So I always think about that rather than like any kind of like framework of like writer's block. I kind of ignore that like mindset and then just think it's like, okay, well, I'm not inspired right now. I should go download some more information, go out, witness other minds, and then come back and write. So I was really relying on this constant stream of inspiration by going to shows every night. I just like walk out there in my neighborhood and go to, there's like 4 venues and there's usually a pretty cool show of something like raw and unique that's like Atlanta based happening every night. And not having that, it was like a real kind of deprivation, like a scarcity. And it took a lot for me to try to find inspiration other ways. So I started to take stock of all of the trees in my neighborhood, all of the local mushrooms that are growing around me, the bird calls. I tried to just really put myself into nature and I felt really lucky, like I had the privilege to do that because I was like seeing people in Italy playing guitar on like in an apartment where they can't leave at all. So I was like, I have nature, so I'm going to use this and I'm going to go out. I'm going to keep my head in the trees. I'm going to keep looking up and I'm going to look at the green. I'm going to see the birds. I'm going to find mushrooms. And we ended up like cooking food every night with stuff that I found. And it's weird because you learn like a few categories of mushrooms. You learn a few different types of edible plants that are around. And then it starts to jump out at you everywhere you go. It's like once you start to put those categories in your mind, you start to kind of chop up the world and kind of see it in a different way.
Yeah, it's kind of like learning a new vocabulary word all of a sudden. You're like, whoa, I heard that in a sentence the other day, and now I know what's up. I know what they're saying. I know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
What did you, I'm curious, like, what are some examples of some of the dishes that you were cooking?
So lion's mane is like this, everyone talked about that mushroom, but it's apparently involved with like helping your body produce a neurogrowth factor, which is like NGF, which is a part of just like helps you produce new brain cells. But there's also like anti-inflammatory properties. That's one. There's reishi is another mushroom that I constantly found. Chanterelles were big in the spring, but lion's mane is so good. It kind of tastes like lobster, but it's its own thing. It's on the West Coast too a lot. But yeah, we found it and you just chop it up with butter. But we ended up making a lot of stuff. We ended up making, like pulled pork with like these oyster mushrooms where you kind of like shred them up as if they're pork. There's a lot of that's really good. I'm trying to think of, it's really pretty much, I mean, if you just use butter, they taste awesome. So yeah. It's like anything really, but there was a lot. I'm trying to think of something specific. I also was fermenting a lot of food. So we made our own like sauerkraut with like purple cabbage and a lot of different stuff. Fermenting mushrooms too is really good, but I was learning all the apocalypse skills.
That's awesome. I haven't done that much apocalyptic training as I probably should. I have looked at my, I have like a stack of books that are like apocalypse books. Like what happens when the electricity goes out? And I'm like, yeah, everything's fucked. Okay, cool. And I get all depressed and I'm like, what's on YouTube? Anything like I'm classic human.
I tend to think that a lot more optimistically, like I don't know. I think we're kind of fed a narrative, like a Walking Dead style narrative, where you're going to have hyper political factions, and you're going to have people who are, I don't know, like fighting for resources, this kind of thing. But every time I've seen a tragedy with my own eyes, people come together, and I can just see my whole neighborhood. If something really happened, like the grid shut down, or there was like some kind of, what is it called, an EMP or something just like really existential threat kind of happened, I really think that we would all pool our resources, and we would all kind of figure out whatever anyone needs, figure out what the needs were of the community. I really kind of have faith in that. Maybe there would be a little bit of like, I don't know, like cutthroat-ishness, but I think that would get like weeded out, because we would have such a strong need to not waste resources on having one person get more than another person. It's like when shit hits the fan, it's like you really have to give everybody the same amount. You have to like figure out where the needs are, and you have to really kind of like count your resources in a way. You don't have the room or the luxury of having like a huge hierarchy with certain people getting scarcity or whatever like that.
That's a great way of looking at it. I appreciate your positive outlook. I tend to try to be positive in those respects, but I think I ingest too much. I download maybe too much at times, and especially lately, like just around the election and around this acquittal and all this stuff. And I'm just kind of like finding myself grinding inside going, fuck, man, if this dude's not going to be held accountable, then all right. I mean, not that I really expected it to be to happen, but at the same time, I'm like, it's the most gross overstep I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not going to do nothing about it. We're just he's fine. We'll see him in 2024. It'll be interesting. Like, no, I don't think that's really the way we should do this, but who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah, man. Well, that's great. I mean, the one thing, strangely enough, the one kind of thing that I have done is I started like training and going out to the shooting range and shooting just to like know what it's like. Cause I've been kind of an anti-gun person for my whole life. I've like shot a little bit when I was young. I mean, not anti-gun. I guess it's really just like not me needing one, like I think that's really what it come down to. But as I saw the world do all this, and then I see all these reports about record gun sales and record ammo and everybody hoarding all the things. And I'm like, okay, I don't feel in line with that reaction, but if you all are doing it, maybe I should know something about it. And that's kind of where I'm at now, is just I've gone out a couple times and did some shooting, and I'm a little less jumpy around it, like, which that feels good, So I'm going to do it some more and kind of keep there, have a handful of classes like, basic handgun safety. And there's one coming up that I'm going to take that's like, what if you get shot, or what if somebody else gets shot next to you? How do you it's kind of like a CPR type class for gun wounds, so I don't know. It seems like it could be helpful.
Yeah, I'm in that same boat. I probably would benefit from some kind of basic. I had pretty much ambivalence towards gun for a long time. I read way too much data. It's like just having one in your house makes it, you're more likely to use it on yourself. It's like, but you're also more likely to perceive threats. It's like, there's one study where it's like, the more like guns in your house, it's like you're more likely to escalate. If someone comes in to steal your TV, which is most of it's just property theft, it's like you're more likely to come out and have a Wild West shootout with a person than to just let them. I mean, for me, it's like, take my stuff. But
Sure.
I think with families and safety and stuff like that, especially with like a paternal figure that's armed, he's going to perceive the worst of the worst, and but yeah, I don't know. I don't necessarily think it's wrong or bad. And I think a lot of us would probably benefit from having at least like a basic awareness about how to use a gun. But yeah, I've always just been like working on my body and mind. So, and then I guess other kinds of apocalyptic skills, I hope some other armed people will take care of that. And then I can do something in the background.
Yeah, I get it. In my mind for the longest time, I was like, well, romanticizing. Well, I'll be they're going to need yoga in the after, the afterworld. let me show you guys how to meditate and chill out. It's not exactly the same as helping you find food, which I can also do, tell me what to look for. But yeah, and I think, that's actually the interesting kind of like paradox around being an awake human being or semi-awake human being in these times is if you follow any of the threads from our modern existence, you very quickly start to realize, unless you're in a trade that is close to the earth, close to the ground, that is like building something, you know, a lot of us artists, a lot of creative types we're already shut-ins. We're already hanging out in closed, dark rooms, looking at screens and making things happen. So unless you're doing that, you know, like, unless you already have a gig that is in that fashion, then it's like, this has really been like an exposing thing. I'm like, oh, if things get worse, I'm not looking for them to get worse, but if things get worse in some way, I'm not really prepared, you know?
Yeah.
Not really, to be honest.
Yeah.
So.
It's interesting. There's a new type of meditation that I've been doing. I'm curious if you've heard of it, like resonance breathing or like cardiac coherence. Have you ever heard of any of that?
No, tell me.
It's kind of all these related things like consonance, resonance, coherence, harmony. It's interesting because it's like the language of sound design and acoustics and synthesis, and all these interests that I have are kind of circulating behind these like basic physical phenomena, like the harmonic series and how it works. But basically, you do biofeedback where you have like a heart rate monitor and you're checking your heart rate variability. So it's like checking how much the BPM varies between beat to beat. And when you inhale, it's your sympathetic nervous system, which is with stress, fighting, also orgasming, all these different things that's associated with. And then when you exhale, it goes down. And it's just a small amount, but it's going down. Every time you breathe in, it's going up. Every time you breathe out, it's going down. But you're trying to engage that parasympathetic nervous system, that break, so you're trying to kind of figure out how to make your heart rate vary more between beats, and it kind of makes you more resilient to stress and stuff like that. But you put on this heart rate monitor, and with resonance frequency, you can find out your specific breaths per minute that basically cause coherence between your blood pressure, this like vascular tone, but basically your heart rate and your breath rate. You want them to cohere in some way, so they're like locked in together. And you can see it in the app. It's like you can see this big, pretty sine wave of your breathing. And it basically means that you're in coherence or this resonance is occurring. And it's hard to be stressed when you're in this state because you're breathing really slow and everything is like together. But it definitely feels like something acoustic. It feels like if you hit a dissonant chord and you resolve, and then it's like, it has that flush feeling, almost like a structure. Like if you think about a bad piece of furniture where it has like loose edges, and then somehow if you were to fix that into a perfect structure, it really does have that feeling of like clicking in. But you train yourself to do it and your nervous system learns how to do it. But there are people, like a lot of CEOs and tech kind of companies are doing this, like a lot of the really powerful people, but also they hire people to do biofeedback for them. Like golf players will be out in the field, like people that might choke, you know, they learn this technique and they can find their particular resonant frequency of breath. And then you can lock into it. So like if you had to do something really important, then you can go into this mode of breathing for a second and it'll really like stop anxiety. It'll stop a lot of the kind of fear and the things that make people choke. But it's been awesome, man. I've been doing it for a few weeks. But yeah, for Valentine's Day, me and my partner, we just like breathe together. It sounds like boring, but you can start to focus in. Like there's this classic Buddhist meditation called jhana. Have you heard of that?
I have heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah. That shit is nuts, man. I think that there's applications for this way outside. Like when you get cross-cultural stuff mixing together, it's like a new perspective. And then you think about stuff that we do and then the way that they do it. And then it's just like all of this fertile ground for new ideas. But jhanas is like, I haven't really there's like multiple stages and it's supposed to be these like phase changes of like the way that you're thinking that occur. Like there's like, I think 12 or 13 stages of jhanas and each one is supposed to be unique. But you start off and you just have to get this singular focus, this kind of pointed concentration. And it's kind of like you're trying to it's like if you try to stab a unsharpened pencil through a piece of paper, it'll like rip the whole paper. But if you sharpen the pencil, you can create a singular puncture, you know? So you're trying to have that singular focus. And then you feel a little bit of pleasure, like in your body, like in your thighs or your hands. You just feel like a little bit of like a vibration or something like that. And then you zoom in on it. So you really try to zoom in on any physical pleasure in the beginning stages, and you try to increase the resolution, and you try to basically become consumed by this physical pleasure. And I've just noticed that this, just trying to get into this first stage of jhanas while I'm doing this resonance breathing, it really does apply to so many places. But you can zoom in to inspiration, you can zoom in to peace, to calm, to quiet. You can really kind of increase the resolution of one small aspect of your conscious experience and kind of use it as a refuge or something like that. Or for Valentine's Day, me and my partner are just breathing together, and I'm just leaning into these exhales, and we're really kind of, I feel like there's some kind of interpersonal resonance. I'm sure science will catch up and figure out how that works. But we're just breathing together, and I'm just seeing like, it's just interesting because you start to get into this super slow mindset, but there's almost like slight like coloration and patterns. And it's almost like I could see like a spectrum of light behind her eyes, almost like rainbow vision or something like that, where you get so into this meditative state. But it's almost like you're seeing that we're all God or something like that. You can really get to that behind the scenes feeling of like, we're all like one consciousness. And yeah, sounds a little bit woo, but I feel like moments like that, man, they spiritually charge you. They make you prepared for stress. They really do like connect you to everyone else.
Oh man, that sounds amazing. First of all, the first part that you're talking about, just finding that coherence between your breath and your heartbeat. I feel like I experienced that on some level regularly through yoga and meditation, but it would be really, maybe you can link me to like how to measure it, because I would love to figure that out and start that process.
There's a few apps. It's interesting. They're studying a lot of long-term meditation practitioners from the East. Almost all of them will have like a single breath frequency that they use. And then people in the West who are like newer at it will have a pretty varied one. And I actually read that like in the 20s, when they were tracking how fast people breathe, basically in the 20th century, like every decade, people breathe faster and faster. So like in the 20s, it was like 6 breaths a minute or something, which is so slow. And now it's supposed to be like 15 breaths a minute. And if you think about it, like, I don't know, maybe in the 20s, walking down a street in the city would be like less stimulating than like one like scroll through TikTok or something. I don't know how stressful the world is now compared, but it seems like we're breathing so much faster. So like to find that slow calm, it's almost like I feel like Westerners are more disconnected to that than ever. So it's like we really have to consciously go in, and then biofeedback is kind of a shortcut where you have your heart rate monitor, you can really like zoom in and try to be like, okay, I have an external device to tell me what is good and what is not good. And that, I think Westerners probably need that proof or whatever because I think it takes like 5 or 10 years of constant meditating to really get into that habit of knowing your body well enough to be able to do it. So it really does seem like technology gives us a shortcut so we can kind of jump in and like, I don't know. I know that I have like, sometimes I feel like I'm so disconnected to my body. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, I want to know more about what's happening. And I feel like there's probably a limit to being able to track every little thing, but being able to just see like a number, even if it's just like, I don't even know what it means, if it says good or bad. It's like, thank you. This is like validation. Now I feel like I'm in the right track.
Totally. Yeah. And I identify with what you're saying for sure, because I think on one hand, we're trained in some ways to kind of like the society in a way gaslights the individual, and so you're trained into a gaslit situation as in most people's households as you arise. Your parents weren't ready to offer the 100% truth and learned a few weird tricks from their parents, and they're passing them down unconsciously. And so the fact that you're the proposal that the average person in the West needs to be, kind of confirmed from the outside a little bit, I feel is a true thing, because I think most people don't really trust themselves unless they're already trained somewhere approximate to this type of thing. Then they might have a head start. But oftentimes you need to see the number and go, oh, that number equals this state that I'm now experiencing. Okay. And now that you can start to trust what you're feeling, just because I know for myself, like I was told that everything was fine, in these certain capacities in my life when nothing was fine. And so after a while, you're like, everything's fine. Okay. Why am I so anxious when you say that then? That's weird.
Yeah. It seems like there's real like technologies that are mental, you know, like technologies involving like looking inward, that I feel like we've lost touch with. It seems like indigenous cultures, even like ancient civilizations, like ancient Egypt. I mean, the pyramids had like these huge resonant chambers where there would be like one tone that everybody would be like meditating with. It seems like there's a lot of like mental technology that we've lost, and we've really tried to control the external world, you know? And it's almost like, I feel like the paradigm, maybe it's even pre-COVID, where it's like we're really trying to control our inner world by manipulating the outer world. And I think maybe now, and the way I see culture moving is like now we're trying to control the outer world by understanding, and I wouldn't maybe even use the word control, but trying to understand and trying to engage with our inner life and trying to really understand it and see it more clearly and really kind of understand how our bodies work and how our minds work and look inward. I feel like it might be more fruitful than trying to fight over resources externally if we can kind of figure out what makes us happy and almost like hack the reward system. I feel like Darwinian evolution, it maybe is pretty cruel as far as what we value, like status and reproduction and things like that. And being able to hack the reward system by looking inward and maybe opting out of this game might be healthier for everybody, and might also kind of just help us empathize with everyone else and things like that.
Mm. Yeah, growing empathy in the population wouldn't be a bad thing. Wouldn't be a bad thing at all. I see it. Yeah, well, I think what you're describing, what I hear is that when with the external fixation, oftentimes is the distraction from doing the internal work, right? And I think that's also just it's something that's passed along because everybody around you is doing it that way too. And it's like, and it's not something that they're necessarily aware of, that if they get this car or job or spouse or something that that they're going to be happy. But over and over, we continue to try to feed the emptiness instead of going towards a place of like, okay, let me just stop and take stock of what I feel and try to find some cohesion within myself so that I can then, act and approach and respond to the world from a more balanced equilibrium. And, I think that, look, we've had spiritual people telling us for thousands of years, hey man, it's not out there, it's in here.
Yeah.
But it's easier, and we're more traumatized and trained towards the other thing. So we just kind of keep spiraling out, going the other direction.
Yeah, man, that really does sum up a lot of what I've like the past couple of years. I don't know if you know this, I had an injury. Basically, I had this ulnar nerve damage right here on my right hand, which is probably the best damage a guitar player can have. But for me, I was using, I use all 8 fingers all the time. So it was really a reality check. But this is like 2 years ago, and I've been in physical therapy, and I'm pretty much, I can feel it starting to improve now. I've still been posting, but sometimes in my videos, you can see like these 2 fingers will recoil a little bit. And it's just like maybe 20% of right hand technique that I've lost. And I've been trying to work it back. But it was such a wake up call. And there's like a huge silver lining with it, because I was completely externally focused. And it was a lot of internalized, just toxic work kind of culture where, I was practicing, people will say that they practice like 12 or 15 hours a day, but I literally was like only with my guitar on. And it's almost like this frantic like search where I'm really running away from myself, and I'm constantly practicing and trying to come up with the coolest possible thing. And I'm motivated by likes and shares and things like that. And your whole sense of self, your sense of self-love is all put out into external world. But I think it really did wake me up, because at some point I started to see like my hand was trembling. I wasn't sleeping very well. I was just pursuing these external goals like without any kind of check-ins with myself. And once I started to see that I was actually hurting my body, and I don't feel a lot of like hand pain for some reason, which is annoying to me. I know that sounds like a privilege to not have pain, but I'm like, tell me when something is wrong, please, body. Like, can you please give me some, because my brain will just toxically keep going. But yeah, after I joined this artist organization here in Atlanta, and they got me health insurance. So then I went to see a neurologist and I got physical therapy. But I would recommend, because America has very little preventative care, if you have health insurance, even if you're not feeling like symptoms currently, go to a physical therapist, like an occupational therapist. You can go to a normal doctor and just say, I mean, even if you have to like fabricate some kind of pain, or think about when you did have pain and describe that, and say that you would like to see occupational therapists. And then you can go, I brought my guitar in and she just literally guided my posture, and she really kind of taught me how to breathe while I was playing. She taught me a lot of stuff. And I feel like in Europe, a place where you like have like you get two, like in Britain, you get two dental, like two teeth cleanings a year just by default for existing. And that just saves so much money, you know, like over in the long run, because you're not running away from, you're not treating the problems when they're really bad, you're preventing them. But I think if a lot of guitar players who are concerned about hand health and their bodies really would benefit from just getting some basic tools from an occupational therapist. But yeah, over the past 2 years, I kind of slowed down a lot, and I really started to look inward. And then when COVID hit, it really gave me opportunity to really kind of look inward and develop myself. Start meditation practices. I run a lot. I do. That's like my primary exercise. I kind of really like aerobic exercise for like mental health and stress. But yeah, now I practice, but it's a lot more forgiving. I take a lot more breaks. I also just, there are ways to not be stupid. You know, like I would practice one technique for 10 hours and I would do it like in these high intensity, like intervals where it'd be like bursts where I would be doing a slow thing and then I would do it really fast and then a slow thing. And I would repeat this and for like 10 hours sometimes. And now it's like, okay, I'm going to practice technique for 10 minutes. And then I'm going to move over and practice like interval training, or I'm going to practice ear training. If I ever feel like I'm doing any kind of damage, I can switch and do ear training. There's a million ways to practice music, even without your instrument. And I've started to lean into all of that. And having just a small injury, it kind of liberated me from being fixated on the sports aspect of music, which I feel like is really toxic. Because art is just not sports. And I think that distinction is important because, I mean, you can play music until you're 80, you know, and you can do art. And some people get better and get more wise and they have more nuanced, interesting takes as they get older. And I'm so appreciative of that. It's not just physical skill in some physical prime of your life. It is literally you assimilating all of the experience that you've ever, you know, and you're able to kind of make a message out of that. But I feel a lot more well-adjusted now and more kind of ready to approach the world after COVID. And I'm just appreciative that I've had time to really focus on myself and work. But yeah, ear training, interval training. There's that new Tom Quayle app. Have you heard of that? Solo Trainer. Tom Quayle released it. It's an amazing app for practicing intervals, but you put up like jazz changes and it just drills you, but it's got this really intelligent like technology where it can read any interval that you play. So it'll just like play like Autumn Leaves or a jazz standard, and you just go through the intervals and it shoots them out at you, and you can put it on like voice leading. But yeah, it's really cool. But yeah, wow. There's a lot of that's like one of my favorite music technology developments. It's just like a simple app, but it's really awesome.
And what's it called again?
It's called Solo Trainer. But yeah, Tom Quayle was working on it for like 2 years or something. You can tell that he put a lot into it, but it is an amazing app. I think it's like $15 or something like that.
Cool. I'll definitely have to check that out.
Yeah,
that sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Getting it a diverse set of objectives within your practice, I think obviously is super important. And it's interesting to listen to you you know, expose some of your neurotic qualities around like, you know, getting into this, because, you know, on the other side of the screen, what a lot of us see is just like, oh man, Josh is awesome. He's got all these unique perspectives. We don't see or hear as much about this side, right? Where it's like, no. I've been nerding out for weeks on end to bring you this one technique, and this is how to apply it. And, so the amount of hours that are behind some of these short, quick blip information videos is probably enormous, you know?
Yeah. And it's interesting because some of the videos that I've done that have done the best have been where I was at my most toxic. It's really interesting.
Wow.
A long time ago, I did that. I did this like moonwalking video where I'm playing this like Michael Jackson song and I'm doing this like moonwalking thing, and I have these little shoes on my fingers. It's really absurd. It's a super absurd idea, but the video blew up and there's all these like viral companies that tried to share it. But I just remember I was working on it. We it's like I have these little shoes on my finger. My hand is dressed up as a puppet, and it just looks like if someone walked in, they'd be like, what the hell are you okay? But I'm sitting here, and we shot it one day, and I didn't like it, and I thought I could get it better. And there was this one fast run that I knew I could get. So I went back home, and it's like 15 hours into working on it. And I'm just sitting there, and I start crying, and I was like, I hate this. And then I'm like, what am I doing in my life? I just had this puppet on my hand, and I'm just like really pursuing it. But anyways, we shot it again, and we just shot it on a cell phone, and then it blew up. But I consistently am rewarded for this kind of negative impact on my body and mind. But I'm learning how to figure out how to work smarter and to not really lean in. I think that there are ways to do it, and I don't have to only hit the gas. I can really kind of zoom out. And also, it's like realizing that we're kind of a fragile material body. That's like I guess Jason Becker is a constant source of inspiration for everybody, but seeing him put up that last album, it's like anyone with a DAW can just make music, and you don't need a body. I mean, you can make music with your eyes. You can make, anything that happens, you can continue to push forward. So I mean, even if I lost my hands, I could make electronic music. But having that one injury and realizing that kind of frailty, that lack of invincibility or whatever, it really did make me feel more like a general musician, like a broader category of a person that makes art versus a person that has like a hyper specific technical skill, and I really appreciated that, because I started to go through all of the jazz history. I started to transcribe Miles Davis, Charlie Parker, all of these things just to kind of increase my melodic vocabulary. But there's so much rich history there, and it's not even just musical, it's American history too. So it's like learning about all that stuff and connecting to it rather than just constantly focusing on technique. It's just really helped me be a better person, but also just more enriched understanding of life on this planet.
That's awesome, man. Anywhere, we all have blind spots, right? And it's an interesting thing to wake up to see, or to be more aware of one or two, or maybe multiple at one time, and see how we can. I like Chuyam Trungpa. He talks about having a light touch, like recognizing the power of the universal energy and acknowledging that. And I think that youth is generally the time when people find there's something, like, oh, I'm fast at track, so I'm going to run, or oh, I'm good at football, I'm this, oh, I'm a musician, oh, I have this artistic thing, I can write. And when one lands themselves in the flow, it can be so exhilarating, and it's a form of cohesion, right? You're like, oh wait, I can feel the thing. And so if that becomes home, then it's easy to kind of abuse that in some aspect. Well, how far can I take this? Mm-hmm. And the nature of if you're one to be holistic, seeing both light and dark, and attempting to see the shadow path as well, like you, and want to integrate it, like you we tend to go to an extreme so that we can kind of find out what's at the end there. Okay, that's far enough. I'm gonna hurt myself, I got to come back. And you kind of go to one side, and then you go to the other side, and then you're like, okay, this is kind of the balancing point. I can go about this far out before I start really paying a heavier price. I can go about this far out before I can't do this anymore. Yeah,
it's interesting what you said about flow. There's so much new neuroscience, and it's always so interesting to me. But I keep hearing these threads between my separate interests. But even in states of flow, there can be corticomuscular cohesion, where you actually have synchronized oscillations between the brain and your muscles. But there's so much new stuff. There's they mapped the connectome, which is all of the connections in any individual's brain. So you can basically go through these fMRIs. I don't know how exactly it works, but there's 4 quadrillion connections. I think there's 70, 80 billion neurons in a human brain, but there's 4 quadrillion connections. And mapping those connections gives you this very complicated harmonic signature. Basically, they're called connectome-specific harmonics. And this becomes all of the language of sound, and it's so enticing to me to hear things. When someone says the word harmonic, it's like my ears perk up. But there's this badass scientist named Selman Adesoy, and she's doing all this research with connectome-specific harmonics, but she basically maps out the participant's brain, and then she gives them, she's done an LSD with DMT. She's done all the psychedelics. She's done people in jhanas, which is that meditation state that I talked about. She's done musical, people improvising, things like that. And she studies the harmonic signature, which is basically the timbre of your experience. It's like the proportion of the harmonics. And she's realizing that like there's really interesting things she found out, but like the lower frequency harmonics are involved in your ego. And basically when people are experiencing ego dissolution, they have a huge interference in the lower ones. And then when people are experiencing these high kinds of synchronization states, they end up feeling very like joyous bliss, and it's very simple consonant harmonics. So it might be the case that like our phenomenal experience can be mapped on to something like sound, but basically the electrical oscillations, whether, I mean, you think about a guitar string, it's like mechanical vibrations, but it's not that different to have electrical current oscillations. You know, it's like, it's still the same physical phenomenon of resonance that's occurring, regardless if it's a string moving or if it's a magnetic field oscillating like a pickup, or if it's your ears using like acoustic fluid, you know, to turn into electricity so your brain can recognize something. But it's mind blowing. But we found that people who are like tripping, or people who are in these like exotic states of consciousness, like in meditation, their brain will have like more of a repertoire for integrating different types of ideas. So it's just like expands this like different ideas that you can pick from. But I'm really interested to see where some of this research goes, because if we can kind of have some like mathematical objects describe our conscious experience, because science has done a famously bad job of like trying to understand consciousness specifically. It's like we can understand part of the brain that is involved with facial recognition, you know, but the whole thing together, like we have this singular ontologically unitary experience, you know, it's like, I don't have to like think there's like not there's because there's separate parts of our brain that are like studying like the edge detection, the color, the shadows, the depth. There's all these different things that we're not even realizing that we're able to instantly parse in one unitary experience. So I think it's really promising to think about these connectome harmonics being like the gateway into consciousness from a scientific, like mathematical kind of point of view. But also the fact that it has to do with like resonance and harmony, and synchronizing oscillations across the body produces these joyous, blissful states. It's interesting. I'm beginning to like value, I used to be in this like always wanting this kind of frenetic energy. I would call it dopaminergic motivations or something like that, where this kind of dopaminergic happiness where I want this like very fast, quick kind of like, whether it's an aha moment or whether it's like flipping through TikTok or something like that. It's like this kind of shallow kind of joy or happiness, where I think that there's another kind that's maybe higher order, where it's like more elaborate synchronization, these like kind of flush harmonic structures of heart, like in your brain or something like that, where it's like equanimity, it's like peace, it's like these very deep sense of safety and joy and happiness. And I've always felt like I've never really been able to slow down. You know, I've never been able to chill and to relax. I've always been the type of person that's like scared to stop working. So now I'm trying to really connect to that other side of this kind of happiness, where you really feel like, I don't even know what equanimity is really like. I feel like I'm maybe just beginning to understand like what that even means, but it's just a purely kind of peaceful state where you don't necessarily need this constant stream of information to feel at ease, that's like where I was.
It's a big concept, man. And dude, kudos to you for taking it on, because like it's everything, right? Like an equanimity, and you could come at it from a lot of different places, but it's a place of in my mind, that how I feel like I have experienced it was just being here and not needing something extra, not being pre-planned, not having an agenda. It's wide open. Like the wisdom of the world is here. It's present. You can feel it, and you just touch lightly. You're just there, and it's a presence that isn't fast or aggressive.
Yeah.
Right. It tends to be an open, spacious experience. And I mean, in a lot of ways, I'm similar. Like my in my youth, man, I was into I'm still into metal. I still like heavy music, but man, you know, I'm thankful for age, man, because it is seasoned me. And you know, and I've always liked other things too, but like I've really I feel like the classic 40 something year olds like, yeah, back in my 20s, I used to do the speed metal thing you guys are doing, but now I listen to a lot of hip hop and neo soul and, you know, I don't know. I just stuff that's more soothing on my ears.
Yeah.
That's not grinding on me.
They asked Gucci Mane if you can be born with the sauce, and he said, "How can you be born with seasoning?" He's like, "How are you gonna be?" But basically, it's a pretty philosophical frame of like thinking. But the idea, like we're growing and learning, and we're gaining the seasoning that is the sauce that we are able to use to be creative and to have conviction with other people. But for me, it's like the conviction with art is everything. So it's like if I can cultivate inspiration, it's weird. It's almost like it matters more than the actual content. Like if I'm inspired, I can play one note and that note will inform me of where to go. You know, it's like that note will give me conviction to pursue with this kind of grace. And what you were saying, this light touch where I am informed by just my whole body is like stoked, you know, and it's like this way of being where, and I'm trying to kind of use that zooming in, kind of increasing the resolution. So if I feel like a little tiny bit of inspiration, I wrote this last thing I wrote, I was trying to kind of use that. It's like this, it's like I'm in 15/4 time signature, which has 60 16th notes, and there's all these different ways to divide that. But I came up with a small rhythmic thing, and I felt this like inkling of inspiration. I wasn't super feeling it, but I really just tried to, in my body, try to figure out where is that inspiration at. And I was like, I can kind of feel it almost around my adrenal glands. I can almost feel it in my legs. So I tried to really just increase the resolution of it and really just lean into this inspired feeling while I was playing. And then it was interesting because the rest of the piece kind of wrote itself. Like it was like I wrote the rest of it in like 20 minutes. But I was able to really just like lean into this inspired state. And it gave me this kind of grace of conviction where it's like, I don't feel awkward. I don't feel like I don't know what I'm doing. I don't feel imposter syndrome. I feel like I'm guided. It's almost like you're receiving it from somewhere else. You know, it's like,
yeah.
But the light touch stuff, man, I've been trying to be more willing and open to taking lessons from different types of instruments and different people. But have you ever heard of Josh Metter?
Oh, he's a guitar player down in down under, right?
Huh?
Australia or?
Yeah.
He's amazing.
Yeah, man. He's young too. And I constantly, I try not to like romanticize youth, you know, but you see someone and they're able to assimilate everything that's ever happened and then improve on it, you know, like, and it's like, damn, but he was transcribing like Coltrane and stuff when he was 12. But he has the smoothest technique I've ever heard. So I booked a lesson with him, and it's interesting because he's very humble and he doesn't really like go out of his way to describe it or embellish what he's doing. But I think that there's a lot there. I recorded the lesson, I was like rewatching it. But I feel like he could have like a philosophy or a method. But what I realized his essential thing is that he knows that you can hear tension in someone's playing. And what I realized that he was trying to tell me is that when someone is like when you're alternate picking and you're doing a specific movement and you're turning around or something like that, it's like you can hear the right hand struggling in a lot of players. And the more you become attuned to it, the more apparent it is. But the reason his technique is just so out of this world smooth is because he doesn't necessarily differentiate legato and staccato, or he doesn't really do hammer-ons and then alternate. They're not in like two separate universes. Basically, he'll play a 3-note for string pattern and it'll be like down, up, hammer on, down, up, hammer on, down. It's like Pat Metheny plays like a little bit like that, and different jazz musicians, but he's basically trying to optimize the timbre, the sound, by optimizing the lack of tension. So it's almost like those two like forms of guidance, you know, it's like minimize the amount of tension and make it sound the best you can. So he's transcribing horn players. So they going to have the smoothest, most lyrical, melodic ways of approaching sound. And what he's doing is that he's basically figuring out like in certain parts, not to put a pick stroke there because it really does add to the tension in his wrist, as well as what you are able to pick out. You feel like the note is more contrived, less graceful, and it's just less of that conviction that I was talking about. Like, but I've been working on a lot of what he says, but he basically just is transcribing Coltrane, Charlie Parker, Michael Brecker, all of these like jazz cats, and he was doing it since he was a kid. And he had some great advice. He was basically saying, like, you hear a line on Spotify, then just take out a screen grab, copy just that line, send that to Logic, and then figure out how to play it, and then find a place. And that, I think the transcription, like figuring out stuff by ear, what gets lost with tab, I love tab and I would use it all the time. But what gets lost with tab, it's telling you where to play it. So like with the guitar, you have like two different axes where you have like a piano on every string going up linearly, but then you go across too. So there's different positions and different places to play things, and there's optimum places to play things. But if you're transcribing a line, it's like there are a lot of ways that you can finesse where that line is on the guitar to make it sound more like what you're hearing. So if you try to figure out the easiest place to play it, it's not going to necessarily reflect exactly like the tonal quality that you want. It's like there's a lot to consider, but it seems like the way he got really good was to constantly transcribe these horn lines, figure out the best ways for him as far as where to put it and the best ways to pick it. And now it's just like such a cohesive thing. He doesn't even think about like what's happening where. But yeah, definitely that kid is like, yeah, he's onto something. Like he's expanding the conversation of guitar for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, I only caught him maybe a month or two ago. Him and I had a conversation not too long ago too, and talked a bit about stuff. Where you took this with the listening and for the timbre and for the lack of tension and for that to be an approach.
Yeah.
And man, I'm lit up like the back of my neck. Like that is so cool because I think that I love it being applied to musicality and guitar, especially in a modern sense, in the Instagram world where, you know, if you can rip off a 10-second, 5-second, 30-second, whatever, something to kind of give a little bit of a wow effect, then you can keep going, you know, and just putting out stuff in that way. But on a personal level, on a personal practice level, that's the one thing. I mean, I have not been for a long time one to even be trying to learn new techniques, and that's to my detriment on some level, to be honest. But one thing I feel like that I have been able to move forward is in how I touch the instrument, and a lot of it has been me being around a lot of you guys, like hanging out while at sound practice, at sound check, and at all these shows, and like walking in on Tosin and watching those guys, you know, and the way they touch the instrument and the way they listen. And I feel like that's been the lesson that is continually, you know, brought to my attention without anybody ever really saying, oh, you should hold it and touch it like this. Well, if you're paying attention to what they're up to and what the difference is, you know, you can spot that lack of tension in a really, really good player because they have this effortless thing that shows up, right? It's
like, the experience wise kind of player, they're going to make the hard stuff sound easy. And that's what you want. You don't want to make the easy thing sound hard. You want to make the hard thing sound easy. I feel like that might be the difference between a novice player and a person who's done it for a long time. Also, vibrato, it's like I tell students too, like if you don't consciously work on it, I mean, there's a chance that over many years you'll have a great vibrato. But if you consciously work on it, it's just going to help you and improve it. But I'll do like a classical style vibrato where you're like moving up and down. And you put a metronome on and people will just instantly like not want to do this. It's like, oh, this is the most boring thing I've ever heard. But you just sit with one note and you're just going, wow, 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 to a metronome, and you're just doing some subdivision. So it'll be like, wow, 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 with one note. And it's funny because people will not want to do this. And then once they do it, they'll be like, whoa, because there is so much nuance in the way that you can play one note, especially with your vibrato. And if even just isolating one kind of classical, like violin, classical guitar kind of vibrato, even isolating that, there's so much in there. And I always tell them, like, advanced players are going to notice your vibrato. Like, even if you can wow some people who just dabble with the guitar, it's like people who've been around the block, they can hear a lot in your hands, and it's beyond tone and instrument. You know, it's like is literally like coming from their hands, from their flesh. And it's like, even just like something like, I frequently, like, no hate on open tunings or anything like that, but like, I frequently prefer to pull off to like my own flesh rather than open strings, because it's like the nut is spreading the note for you. And that's just like such a limitation. The nut, it doesn't sound bad in open string, you know, but it's just stagnant, and you can't really continue to express the note like you can with your actual flesh. So if I pull off to my own hand, I can vibrate the note, I can bend it, I can do all these other things. But if I pull off to the nut, unless I'm doing like some kind of B bender or like some behind the nut bend or something, then it's just pretty much, I can't continue to express the note other than just stopping it. I can't really continue to like let it like ring or let it sit. But it's interesting. The better vibrato you have, the more dissonant stuff you can get away with too. Like I could hit a chord with a bunch of half steps in it, and you can just let them sit and linger because you're able to kind of have the notes move and breathe. And that's what is really cool about vibrato. I feel like you're able to justify, and that's the thing with conviction. It's like, I want to get out there with concepts harmonically, melodically, rhythmically, and to be able to justify that and not sound like you're just masturbating or just like overly investing in like the idea of something rather than the actual content. Like, does this actually sound good? Is this just good on paper? I feel like you have to really have this kind of grace and conviction with the concepts. You have to know them really well, and you have to be able to kind of sell them in a way. But for me, it's like polyrhythms or even like really advanced harmonic concepts. It's like you really have to sit with them, really kind of explore them, and then be guided by that experience, so you can have the conviction. And then things like vibrato and just all these little subtle factors really do help you convey it to other people. So they actually, like, I want to be able to play something in 15/4, you know, and have a regular person who's not into music specifically, you know, bob their head, you know, and that's the thing for me. I really just want to have people be able to kind of move their body with what I'm playing, and to not have it be a chore. So like to be able to kind of run all of the computation necessary to create the Bitcoin or whatever, to be able to kind of like manufacture that. It's like, I really have to sit with the time signature for a long time, figure out all the ways that it can groove, and then kind of like put in that work to have later have this conviction and grace, so I can like, people will actually understand what I'm doing.
Yeah, so you can make it musical, right? So you can, because if your body can embody that rhythmic pulsation, then and you can you know be an example of it, then others can then tune into that resonance. Actually, as part of what going back to, like, you're talking about you and your partner meditating and breathing together. And I wanted just to say, I think I love that so much too. On a couples level, that's super cool, and something that it can obviously build deeper relational aspects of everything, which is amazing. But just in the context of when I teach yoga classes, is one of my favorite things is I'm observing, you know, 15, 20 people in a room, and listening to the breath. And I'm always observing the crowd of people as they come into the room, you know, and they're like, you know, everybody's like got their own little neurotic things that they do to get into the class and get there, and how they show up and what their energy is like. And then and then my job is to be a bit of a conductor of their breath and body, right? So I'm calling out, and how I space my words, the timbre of my voice, the music I choose for the playlist, the order of the playlist, all these things make a big deal. And you know, yoga meaning union, and being interested in one being in cohesion with oneself as well as one's environment. My goal tends to be to find a group resonance, you know, for between the movement and the breath. And then by the end of class, to have that rest and digest parasympathetic kicked in, and the body, you know, the least amount of mind, the least amount of doing possible, and allowing for that space to happen. That was the thing that, like, when it happened to me the first few times, I was like, this is possible. I was like, oh, like I can actually let go and feel like I start to feel that state of equanimity, so to speak.
Yeah, man, I'm really interested in like resonance. I feel like at some point it would be dope to have like a festival with like 10,000 people and have them all somehow if we had like a portable fMRI or something, we could like check out their brains and what's exactly happening with like 10,000 people hearing the same rhythm, bobbing their head the same. I feel like we've been so reductionist with the way science is operated, but we study brains and we try to understand the human condition. And it's like, you're studying one person who was created by a culture. And it's like, we need to study everyone's brains and how they're interacting. And I feel like that's going to give us a lot more information. But I had a student one time, he's from the UAE, and he's Muslim. And he was telling me, he's like, it's funny because he's telling me I have to come to Mecca. He's like, come to Mecca, bro. You got to come to Mecca. And he's basically asking me to like convert to Islam, which I'm probably not going to do. But he did talk about Mecca, and it's just like, it's like a million people like all together, like breathing together, you know, and it sounds amazing, honestly. And I actually think you could exchange information way more quickly with like resonating bodies. It's like, you think about a game of telephone, if you're trying to tell someone information, they're doing something completely different. But if everyone is on that same frequency, everyone is like feeling the same kind of vibe. I imagine it's just like bliss. I mean, I can't really think of it. I can't really conceptualize it, but that seems like one of the most like cohesive or coherent like form of a human resonance that we still have like in today's age. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, I have, strangely enough, I felt a form of that, a form of cohesion in groups, like in mosh pits back in the day when I was a kid, like going to Pantera classes, Pantera school, Pantera shows. You know, like I've been to enough of them. It almost was like school or church or something for me, but but like, and it's funny because that I was obviously hotter in my temper and more upset and had a lot more to rebel against in that time of my life. So that Pantera sound and other like-minded bands, you know, definitely spoke to me. But there had been moments, I've recalled a few different times being in the pit where everybody, and people that have been in these things, like they probably are stopping going, oh, is he gonna, there is a thing, right? Like, it's like an eye of a storm type of feeling. It's, and everybody, even though everybody's like running into each other and there's a little bit of like aggression and like this chaos feeling, there's also this like really heightened cohesion thing that happens because we're all there being like saturated by these harmonics and these tones and these rhythms. And when everybody locks in, there's like an undulation that happens, and I'm just like, whoa, I'm a part of the wave. That's crazy. You know, and I'm crashing on the shore again and again, and we're doing it together. And I mean, it's not as peaceful as I'd like it these days, but the fact that there was a thing there is interesting to think about, because I hear about like all the group, you know, thought around Mecca. It made me think of that.
It's amazing. I think music, there's a book I was reading, I have it right here, like Subversive History of Music. But yeah, music has been such a powerful tool to synchronize people and to have common goals, it's like a labor technology. You think about sea shanties, it's actually like Black music coming from like the slave trade, where these sea shanties would coordinate massive amounts of people, and they would be able to kind of synchronize their movements and get a lot of stuff done. And then that technology was like replaced by steam engines or whatever. But you can kind of see the roots of that music in it. There's so much interesting things about embodying music and how it allows us to align our goals. But it's interesting, like in the colonies pre-America, you know, it's like they outlawed any use of enslaved people having drums whatsoever. And it's interesting, in Louisiana, there was, it's interesting because you had the Romance languages in Louisiana, like French speakers, Spanish speakers, where the English colonies, we didn't have that former Africanization that the Romance languages did. So you had all of this like connection with like Spain, Portugal, Iberian Peninsula, and Africa. It's right there. So they were more willing to allow like culture to exist. So that's kind of why New Orleans is the birth of jazz. But I read a lot about jazz history, but it's like there was this place called the Congo Square, where all of these people would kind of reinvigorate cultural paths, and they would dance to drums and things like that. And all of that was completely outlawed in the colonies. It's really interesting to think about, but like they were so scared of music because it was a subversive technology where it would allow them to cohere, you know, it would allow them to all synchronize and rebel. And so like any kind of music was outlawed, and I just remember reading about Thomas Jefferson and people like that, like literally, like he was arming, there was a bunch of slave revolts in Haiti, and he was so scared of it happening in the States. And it was very vulnerable for the colonies to have this gaping problem where like you don't actually do your labor. You have people you forced to do it because they can always like uproot everything. But like the fact that he was like arming people in Haiti trying to stop the revolts, and he was just petrified of music. It's amazing to me. But another thing I read, David Graeber is an anthropologist, but he wrote a lot about some revolutions that happened in Madagascar. And there was this, it's really interesting, outside of like this kind of rational paradigm of like, we're going to use science or whatever. It's like there are cultural technologies that can occur. But in Madagascar, there was like French colonization, and there's a couple of groups that like were able to persevere and not succumb. And one of them was like, I don't know the exact details, but they came down with what the West called dancing sickness. And basically you would just start to convulse, and everyone just caught it. And the only way to cure it was to have these shamans drum it out of you. So basically it was like these people who were being enslaved, they had mandated Christianity. It was like all of these new colonial French things that were occurring in Madagascar. And these people, it was like hundreds and thousands of people descending upon the capital with this new colonial ruler just convulsing. And then you had hundreds of shamans playing drums. And basically they just like executed this colonial like person that was installed and rejected. Basically the military were so like overwhelmed by this like feat and this the appearance of this. It was like, I mean, I imagine if you saw this in real life, you would be like thinking something spiritually was going down. You know, you'd be like,
totally.
But yeah, there's just such a rich history of music making people connect, you know, and making people like unite. And I really want to like continue to think about that, like with rhythm, bodying rhythms and things like that. Even like, this is a random fact, but the Instagram GIFs that you use for music, it's like they have this unique amorphous kind of character where their bodies are not necessarily moving to one consistent tempo, but they're embodying a couple different subdivisions of the tempo. So when I play a polyrhythm, it's really interesting. They synchronize to the tempo of the song that you're playing, but it will be a vague thing, but it's almost like they're embodying multiple rhythms at once. And if you watch people dance, that's what they do. It's like people are rarely just like it's like they're doing something like where it's like there's a few different rhythms happening in their body. But that's the thing I love about polyrhythms and just rhythm. And I think even like what you were talking about with metal, like that high intensity, I feel like it's a real like rhythmic connection. And with harmony and melody, I feel that like all over my body and especially in my head. And I feel it in the back of my head, like with the hair stand up, you hear a beautiful harmony or melody. But when I feel rhythm, I feel it in my gut. You know, I feel rhythm in my stomach. I feel it in the core. It's shaking me. So I feel like even if it's aggressive, you know, I feel like there's a place for all of that, you know, and it's like, there is a place for this kind of subtle, like beauty of like minimal, like perfect melodic choice, you know, and then there's another kind of resonance that comes from this really shaking up your bowels, you know, really shooting sound into someone's stomach and then making them feel it. But I really want to be able to try to combine that, you know, like have just like beautiful nuanced melodies and harmony, but then have these elusive rhythms that are kind of like slipping out from under you that you can't really put your finger on and stuff like that.
Yeah, man. The rhythm in the gut, it's a primal, like a primal thing, right? Like that's definitely what I experience with the right metal band, especially in a live situation. I mean, Meshuggah is the last band for me. I mean, there's still some great bands out there, and I mean, there's lots of great bands. I'm just getting old, and like I'm sorry to all the bands that like I should like right now, but I just like I'm so absorbed in other worlds. But I saw Meshuggah and Tool's a different thing, but as far as like a heavier rhythmic thing, I mean, I still think that Tomas Hawk is like, I mean, he's just like the slayer of all slayers to me. And
it's funny, the singer for Little Tybee, Brock, he's not really into metal. It was like I had a flirtation with metal back in the day, but I can appreciate it for sure, and especially when I hear something like Car Bomb or something, I'm like, wow, this is really cool. But I generally don't like to hear screaming at me. Maybe this is like just a unique thing. It almost feels like my dad is yelling at me or something when I'm listening to heavy screaming. Like it's just I really like instrumental metal for sure. But anyway, I took Brock. He's really not from a metal world at all. He comes from like a folk, like Paul Simon kind of world. But I took him to see Meshuggah when Animals and Leaders opened for them, and he loved it. It's like irrefutable when you're there. You know, it's like, damn. It's like, but also you can bob your head to all of it. It's not that angular sound, you know. And I think there's a place for that kind of angular sound. But I feel like a lot of, especially math rock, it'll be just like harsh edges, you know. And for me, it's like I want to do really interesting rhythmic stuff, polyrhythmic stuff. I want it, I mean, as complex as the weirdest speed metal, but I want it to groove. And that's the thing. And that's what I want you to be able to move your body and feel it in different places of your body too. It's like, because it's interesting, like like the West, like the way we think about music, the fact that it was such a class thing, and it was, well, you have to go to this theater and not move and not make any sounds or anything like that. I feel like just in so many traditions outside of the West, it's like you can't separate dance and music. And the fact that we decoupled them, like I heard, I wish I could remember their name. Basically, this African music theorist was saying, like, the idea that dance is a separate discipline and music, like, is completely new in human history. It's like, how can you separate the moving of your body to music from music? They're like completely intertwined. And the idea that you can't dance, but you can play music is sort of absurd.
So totally absurd, honestly.
I feel like growing up in like some kind of suburb cultural void, where the only way I could really move my body as like a boy was like through physical strength, you know, like through sports or fighting, you know. And I see a lot, like in East Atlanta, the kids here, they know every dance trend now, and it's like they are so in touch with their bodies. And I just feel like a lot of like white suburbia can be like that, where it's just like, if you really move your hips too much, then you'll be perceived as gay. And if you just dance, it's like effeminate or something. But it's like the only way when I was a kid, and it's like high school, I'm sure is so much different now, but it was like, you can be a jock, you can fight someone, or maybe you could like get romantic with a person, but you can't like publicly move your body in a way that's like self-aware. I don't know. I can just see, like, it's just funny. I missed out on a lot of that, but you see other cultures, and then just even here in Atlanta, it's like the kids, I mean, it's just the most nuanced movement of hips, you know? And it's like, I feel so awkward now in my own body. And it's like, I feel like a lot of us were robbed from that kind of deeper connection. But yeah, this year I've been trying to learn to dance on
That's
YouTube.
awesome.
Yeah.
My little niece, Camila, she's a TikTok pro. And she made me do my first TikTok with her the other day. But growing up, it's interesting that you bring this thing up too, because in junior high, I remember going to my first like junior high dance, you know, school dance. And it's mostly like in my memories, it felt like there's the jocks and the preps. And the girls kind of, you know, were blended in somewhere in there. Either you're a cheerleader or popular or not, you know. And I felt like I was somewhere in between. Wasn't really that popular. Wasn't really a jock. Wasn't really into fighting. And I could have friends in all across all lines. But I remember just going in and feeling like, oh yeah, dancing, man, I'll give it a shot. Like, let's go. I've seen MC Hammer on, you know, I was, you know, it's in the late 90s, late 80s, early 90s actually. And I just remember looking around after a while and it's like, oh, it feels like I have more rhythm than most of these jocks and prep. Like, they're mostly standing around. They're not really doing anything. And I just thought, oh, well, maybe this is one of my things. That's cool. Like, I was like, oh, I don't swing the bat as good as them. I don't run the football as good as them, but I got this thing. That's cool. And so I pushed into it like through 8th grade, and I kind of became one of the 2 guys in school that danced. And
that's big, man.
And then I went into high school, and while I was in junior high, I was sneaking into high school dances. I wanted to dance so bad because it felt so good. I didn't play an instrument. I was like, yo, this feels awesome. You know, so I would go into the other dances and stuff and try to learn moves, you know, off of watching VH1 or MTV at the time. But what was interesting is that me and my buddy Don, who I do hip hop stuff with now and have off and on through the years, but we caught the attention of a lot of the girls. And they were like, hey, like the drill team was like, hey, you should come teach us some of those moves, you know, so we can put it into one of our things. So we ended up, while all the other guys were at football practice and basketball practice, we were hanging out with their girlfriends, you know, teaching them dance moves. that didn't go over that well in a small little hick town that was mostly 4x4s and country music, like AC/DC was their thing outside of their country music.
Yeah.
So I had multiple times where I got cornered and like almost beat up. Like I never got beat up, thankfully, but like I had multiple packs of wild roving like hick dudes driving in their 4x4s show up to my house and try to egg me on to come outside so they could try to like beat me up for dancing.
Yeah.
For dancing. I never did anything.
It's interesting. I think their lack of dancing is also contributes to the willingness to commit violence. It's like they probably don't know how to express themselves, and it's like I really do think that's linked. This is like semi-related. There's a panel of neuroscientists that basically said the single greatest activity for the elderly to do is to dance. And they were talking about like you align all these things, but you're expressing yourself, you're moving your body, there's mobility, and there's also like the potential for romance. There's all these things that keep your brain active. So these people were saying for elderly people, the more they can get into some kind of dancing routine and also just like events where you have to dance, it's like super good for them. But I always think about just expressing yourself and how a lot of boys have problems with it. It's like we can't say I love you. You can't like. I mean, even eye contact sometimes is hard. And it's like, I feel like in the past for me, it's been like, you have to get ridiculously drunk to tell your guy friends that you love them. And it's like, that's not good. But I think dancing is like such a healthy way to express yourself and to move your body that it would literally make you less likely to be physically violent. Because bottling it all up and never moving, like the idea, like some men, it's like they can't even laugh. It's like, that's a sign of weakness, So it's like, like, to really unpack all that, I mean, and move your hips to sing falsetto, to let yourself express yourself like that. I feel like it's so rewarding and healthy and like fundamentally.
So rewarding, man. There was actually right before pandemic hit, I had found a freaking vein of gold. And had I still been in Hollywood and you came through on tour, I would have taken you immediately there.
Okay.
There's this woman, Kate Shella, so Moon Unit Zappa is a good friend, and she would always invite me to these cool little things that she would get invited to, and she the first time we ever really hung out, she took me to a Kate Shella 5 Rhythms dance party thing, and and I was like, what is this, like an ecstatic dance? She's like, yeah, but it's like more intentional. It's kind of run like a yoga class in a way where and the DJ is also the MC and is also like kind of just guiding you through it. And she chooses like 5 particular rhythms. And it's kind of like a double art class where you come in and you just kind of, it's free movement is the idea, but occasionally she'll throw out things to do for the group. And so the group kind of like interprets that in a certain way. And occasionally you have the opportunity to take a partner and not touch anybody, but just lock eyes with them and mirror and play with the movements. And they tend to last about 90 minutes. There's no talking on the dance floor. It's a drug-free environment.
Wow.
Although I admittedly took an edible here and there a couple times and had a really great time. But it was seriously one of the greatest compliments to my yoga practice, and to have 100 people in a room going nuts and not talking and not judging and just like, hey, if you're not vibing with somebody, just keep moving in the room. But if you find your group, you stay and you vibe and you have a really great time and you mirror and you get goofy and you really try to like get into the nooks and crannies that like most other movement programs aren't going to get, because like as you described, there's a lot of like compound rhythms constantly happening throughout the physicality of yourself when you're doing dance. So incredible.
That's dope. Yeah.
One of my favorite things. And I too, I would say, I'll go back and say that during like in high school, almost getting beat up a handful of times for being somebody into dance and hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
It shifted me, and I was like, okay, well, that's not cool. So my good friend started playing guitar, and he played one riff on the guitar, and I was like, okay, I'm going to trade my skateboard, get a guitar. I'll try to be cool like that. You know, I'll try to see it because that's very interesting. Music, anything that had to do with music made sense to me. And I remember being locked down from probably around that age of, I'm not fully locked down, but not as open as I was, from like around 17 to about, I don't know, into my mid 20s and somewhere in there. I forget where it was, where it really kind of came back to me. It really came back to me towards my 30, like my early 30s, but a big season of like thinking, oh, dancing's not that cool. And I remember being more aggro and more angry in fact during that season. So I think
it's funny you said you traded your skateboard. When I was 12, it was like, it feels so juvenile now to look back on, but when I was 12, I saw like a tremendous fork in the road. It was like almost spiritual, where I was like, all right, you either can become a professional skateboarder or you can become a professional musician. It's like, you have to decide today. So I was like, I thought about, really what sold me was like, I was like, skateboarding doesn't typically make people cry. I was like, I feel like music, there's something deeper here that I can connect. No hate to skateboard. I'm sure there's an art to, the style, everything about it. But at the time, I was just like, okay. And then also I was thinking about music and how like you can age with art in a different way than you can with sports. But I thought about this literally when I was 12. So then I sold my skateboard and I sold I had like a bunch of boards and trucks and all these different things. And I sold them all that day. And then I got another pedal or something. And I was just like, all right, it's guitar from here on out. But it's interesting. Like, I don't know. I feel like I had a tremendous amount of motivation. I also had really supportive parents. We weren't like rich. I kind of come from like the trailer park in a way, but they were always like, you can do anything you want in this world kind of vibes. So I really did think I could either become a professional skateboarder or a guitarist, but I'm glad that I picked music for sure. But yeah, but it's interesting. I had that kind of similar fork in the road. But interestingly, I didn't dance. However, I would put like a strobe light on in my room, and I would put on the Deftones, and I would turn off the lights, and I would just like headbang and play along. Yeah. So, in a way, that's a little bit like dance, and you are able to kind of express yourself.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And well, that was the thing for the longest time, is as I went into my aggro state, the closest thing to really getting the dance vibes was being in the mosh pit or like headbanging, rocking out like with my band as I started a band, and it was trying to get on stage and act out the movements to the metal music that we were creating. Right. And that was the closest thing to that same type of, I don't know, honestly, looking back, I'm not sure there's much that is, dancing is cool and I love it. But if you're ever in a metal band or any kind of band for that matter, and you really vibe with your own rhythm that you're creating and everything, and you're on stage holding your instrument, moving to it, that might be like the apex of the thing. I don't know. Like, 'cause I had so many great experiences on stage with my guy friends, my band, like just, we'd spend all those hours like hammering out up and 2, 3, 1 in stop, and you have all this kind of muscle memory that gets built up, and it's not different in my mind to organizing a dance or a routine and then ending up at a particular place at a particular time, right? And
it's interesting. Over the pandemic, I did something kind of weird. I got involved. Basically, a mutual friend, this guy Liam, is really awesome. He's been in the healthcare scene in LA. He got hired by Netflix to basically help craft their COVID policy. But he ended up getting me hired as an extra, a musician extra for this movie on Netflix. And I don't even know if I'm going to be in it. Who knows if my scene is like that consequential. But it was a really weird experience. But I was basically in a hotel in a bubble, completely sequestered for like 2 months. And it was this movie. I think I could say it's Red Notice is what it's called, but it's The Rock. A super strange world, but very interesting. But basically the scene, I was actually playing piano in the scene, and there's a harpist, and we're basically a full band. So I might be in the shot just peripherally for a second. But it's interesting because everything for COVID is they use plates. So it's like they have a click track, and everything is aligned to this click track. And there's these like hyper specific places all over the floor that you have to be on in different places. But the reason they do this is because they shot everything with the actors like beforehand, and then they shoot all of the extras afterwards, and then they edit in the actors, and we have to shoot around their movements. So, and then
Wow.
we're wearing like 2 face masks and a face shield, and we're wearing, it was just really bizarre. They actually printed out our faces to put a mask on the mask. So, and it looks like you're wearing some like Hannibal Lecter face. It looks absurd. But
Wow.
it was a really rewarding experience to see. But it's really interesting what you're talking about, because like we have these dancers that they hired, and we're the musicians they hired. So it's like we're the specialized kind of extras, and we're all in sync with this click that's not even to the music. It's a click to just the general like order of the movie. So they're dancing, and they're dancing around where the rock is in the scene, and it's like I'm literally thinking like their movement is going to be here when I have to hit this note, and we're just miming the music. But it was super interesting to see. But it's very like interlocked, where like there was no like spare movement. It was like, but like all of our movements were completely synced, and it was just interesting. But I had never like worked with a dance group before as a musician, so that was pretty interesting to see. It's also just really cool. Like there's so many similar common things that we're worried about. I mean, we're keeping time, we're worried about self-expression and all these other things, but just talking to people and thinking about dance history. And I appreciate them, having them around. I want music and dance to be more together, like that. I feel like how they were like in ancient history, rather than this kind of complete separation, because it just seems like there's so many overlaps, and like the history of dance is the same as the history of music.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's like maybe that's what I'm thinking as you're saying that. I'm like, maybe that's why I mean, it's not uncommon for like pop superstars to be, choreographed dancers, right? You look at a lot of
Yeah.
like the pop queens, the Britney Spears, the Christina Aguileras, the Madonnas, and of course Michael Jackson, of course Justin Timberlake, and like, so as a culture, we definitely like vibe off of it. It's like a genre now. Like it's like if you're like an interesting dance music or pop music icon, you kind of have to be on that level in some level.
Yeah.
But musicians aren't expected, necessarily to follow that suit. It'd be interesting to see a whole band. I mean, it's like you see like drumline style bands where a drummer can get up and kind of go somewhere on the stage.
Yeah.
And like, that's what I love about the Roots, actually. Like if you see the Roots live, that whole band is constantly dancing all over the stage, and they have a tuba player or maybe it's a sousaphone, or I forget. But there's a few bands out there that rock that, and I think that maybe that's why I'm drawn to some of them is that combo without even actually like thinking of it that way. But
yeah, I'm sure that it gets you more into the music yourself too. Like there is a way that you can be a little bit checked out if you're only focused on like the technical aspects, and you're not focused on just moving it and feeling it. But I imagine if you have a dance routine, it's like really hard to fake it. If you're coming out there having to entrain your whole body. I always think about this with lessons. I teach someone like just how to do a specific strumming pattern or something like that. And it's like when you see a singer songwriter playing, it's like your whole body's entrained into this thing, and it's like you ask them to do one thing outside of the context of the whole, and it's like they're confused. It's almost like riding a bike or something. You're like getting this whole entirety of the motion together. So I feel like it can be intimidating for a guitar player to be like, how can you play this and sing? When I think the singer songwriter, they're learning them together and they're like interlocked. It's like, but yeah, I imagine once you cue that up, it's a lot harder. Like it's almost like driving. I always think about like, be easy to drive a car with like one hand and one finger, like on a joystick. But it's almost better that we have our whole body involved because it makes it more into the experience, and we really need to be, because it's dangerous. So it's like if you could just have like one finger on like one pad controlling it, it's almost like your whole rest of your body, I don't know, having the whole body entrained into the action of it. It's almost like you're more involved and more singular focused in the action.
100%. Yeah. Hey man, will you tell me a little? I know that you're less on the on the guitar pick side, but I know you still use a guitar pick, and I know a while back I thought you used maybe a Jazz 3 or something for a while. But I'm curious about if you'd tell us a little bit about like what you remember about the early days of getting into guitar, and what you remember about guitar picks, and how you came to play what you play now.
Cool. Yeah. I basically just play like 1.16 Jazz 3s. These Tortex, they're pretty basic, minimal, I guess.
Okay.
But I went through a lot of picks. I used to play those 3mm big stubbies that are like purple. Those were rad. But yeah, I started off and I just kept getting a thicker and thicker pick. When I first started playing, I had like a 6-string Jackson that I tuned down to A, and I was like learning Korn songs and the Deftones songs and stuff like that in middle school. And I had a super thick pick, and then at that point I started. Yeah, I think this is before the boutique pick kind of scene exploded. So this is like I was looking constantly. Like a 2mm pick was like the biggest that I'd ever seen, and then these big stubbies came out that were 3mm, and I was so stoked. And then at some point I was playing them, and it's funny, I went to music school at the same time Tosin did, and we were kind of close there. And I feel like we were both learning a lot of the same kind of stuff. We were both like watching Victor Wooten instructional videos and stuff like that. But he told me that he could hear the pick in the tone, this big stubby, this like, so I really thought about that. And then later I started to see more and more thick picks. And I really was able to kind of hear them in the tone. And it's almost like this glassy kind of scraped sound, but some of these really huge picks, it's like, even if they're really good for sweeping and things like that, I can still usually hear them. And I would prefer to not be like, my attention to be brought to the pick while I'm listening. I would almost want it to disappear into the music. So then I kind of like reconsidered that. And then I started to just get a more minimal pick, and I went, and I think I tried a bunch of them, but yeah, there's just this small shape where I can kind of just try to keep it as economical as possible and have the pick almost disappear. But I still pick a lot and I still use it. And then after that Josh Metter lesson, I really have been focusing on trying to kind of minimize tension and just make it sound as fluid as possible. So ideally I could be able to play through a line and do sweeping and ups and downs and hammer-ons and pull-offs, and you wouldn't really be able to know what is happening. You know, it's like, I don't want it to sound like a machine gun necessarily, or something that's like hyper like contingent on the pick, but to sound like this just smooth kind of musical transaction rather than something like specifically connected to the pick.
That's cool. Yeah. So you're continuing to make it more a part of your voice, and it is, as opposed to just focusing on the technical aspect of that piece being involved. Yeah.
I still put the pick in my mouth intuitively. I can't get past that habit. I feel like it's kind of gross, especially if like you let someone use it. But maybe post-COVID I'll have to change that habit. But yeah, it's like if I'm playing and I want to do something tapping, I'm like just really quickly put it in my mouth and then I grab it back. But I mean, the pick is so efficient. It's interesting. Have you heard of that artist? I guess he's from Italy, Mattios. I don't know his last name, Mancuso or something like that. I wish I could pronounce his name, but he does finger picking like this. And I saw a clip recently of Al Di Meola talking about him. But this kid is just like absurd. But he can play like Calypso Dover. He can play like all of these classic songs like perfectly, which is, it's almost like a bass kind of technique, but it's all finger style, and it's really, really cool. But it's interesting. I think the timbral characteristics of the fingers are more of a variable, where you have like the flesh is going in, and then you have if you go in a different direction, you have like a part of your fingernail is involved, and there's like this very nuanced way of trying to approach it. And there's a lot that you can get a lot of warmth out of just like skin on the strings. But as far as efficiency goes, it's like a pick makes so much sense for being able to kind of quickly play a note and have it not vary. You know, you want the same dynamic range for everything. The pick makes a lot of sense. I just feel like in the West, or in the States maybe specifically, we got fixated on the pick in this kind of obsession in the 80s and 90s. And it's like other guitar cultures were still developing, you know, using like Raschiato, using all kinds of different things. But the pick, it's like we were so obsessed with it and getting the smoothest, most consistent tone, you know. But I feel like it's just one of many ways to kind of articulate a note, like whether it's tapping or Raschiato or finger picking, or it's just like one of many like timbral tools that we can use.
Yeah. It definitely seems, I like, you know, you're the first person that really highlighted that the pick kind of levels like this, you know, what is it? What did you say? The timbre or the
Yeah, it's just the dynamics. It's just complete. You can be completely consistent with a pick.
Yeah, the consistency. That's really what I'm looking at. Is the pick levels, the consistency across the board. If you want something to all kind of stay in the same place, whereas you have to use your fingers. There's so much more nuance to get a very consistent sound. And you have to, maybe work a little harder for that. I wonder if it was the kind of the rock god type of thing that, like, to me, it's like picks, like early day picks, seeing people with guitar picks. I know jazz guitar players play with picks too, but, it seems like players were the ones that had guitar picks predominantly, and I think, although like nowadays it's really cool to watch. I love watching, Richie Cotson is one that I really enjoy because he's a non-pick player, but he's a rock, and he can shred with a couple of fingers. And there's that dude, it's a Jared James Nichols. Do you know this guy?
I don't think so.
He's a Gibson artist. He's like a classic. He plays these like Les Pauls with a P90 only in the bridge, no neck pickup at all. He's a wild man on the guitar, and he's just, I love it because he's got close videos and you can see that he kind of holds his fingers as though he was holding a pick often to get certain parts, but then he kind of interchanges, using picking and plucking and tapping, and he's so good at it that it's like, that's actually got to be a more useful way of playing, because you have so many options here, where there's a few with a pick. It's not like it's not useful or that it's not diverse, but
it seems like in the 80s it was like the speed thing, like there's such a huge amount of labor that's needed to be able to play fast. It's like like the entry point, or the fee, like the price to get in is so vast, and you really have to sit there with a metronome and do this kind of mind-numbing work constantly. And I feel like that, like, razor sharp focus required to get really fast, maybe kind of the peripheral of all the ways that you don't need a pick, or maybe tuned out. It's like we really did hyper fixate. And it's interesting, like in country music, people were playing chicken picking and stuff like that.
Sure.
And then hybrid picking. But then in the rest of the world, I mean, there was some of the coolest 7-string stuff I've ever seen, like in Brazil and like stuff like that. And you see every finger of the right hand is being used, the thumb. And there's so many different variety in sound that you can produce with your right hand. It seems like that razor, just that narrow focus required to get very good at playing fast. And the pick was a good option for that. So I feel like that maybe like just blinded people to all the other options for a bit. But it seems like now hybrid picking and all of this stuff is becoming respected. And I realized, like, I taught a rock class at the Atlanta Institute of Music. And one of the songs we had to do was Satch Boogie. It's a Joe Satriani song. But I was getting people to hybrid pick it because the timbre is so cool. Like, you get this pop with your middle finger, and it doesn't have that consistency. And a lot of my techniques and the development of them have been about trying to play the same note, like with glitch tapping, trying to play the same note in different ways and having a variety of different timbres and still playing quick. So I really did I feel like I inherited that need to play quickly, but I really tried to kind of focus in on the different timbral characteristics possible. But like with a glitch tap, if I'm doing like 3 hammer-ons in my left hand, and then or like if I started with my right hand, do 3 hammer-ons and then do 3 hammer-ons on my left, I'm getting these sounds like a percussive staccato kind of sound, even though it's without the pick. And then if I do a down up with my thumb and a pluck, 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 all of these different things, the down has a really different timbre than the up when you're thumping. So it's like the down is mostly my thumb's flesh, and then the up is mostly nail. And that's like almost like the difference between a bass drum and a snare. It's like pretty dramatic, like that, to have the higher end so apparent when you hit it with your fingernail. And then every finger is just slightly different because I'm hitting them from a slightly different angle. And then and then you'll see a lot, like Tosin is doing a lot of like selective picking now. And I do a lot of stuff like that with thumping, but it's just interesting because you get a just unique sound about it. And it's really hard to develop the strength in your left hand to have that really solid, consistent sound. And the pick is a lot more efficient at it. But the reason why people are choosing these techniques is because they sound cool, and not necessarily because there's not a more efficient way to do it.
Sure. That's interesting, man. There's so many different ways to get at it, and we all have our own little thing that comes out. I'm curious, like, I got a couple questions for you. One is, I think a while back you mentioned something where you had talked about doing a solo album. Are you still working on that?
Yeah. So I'm working on a solo album. We're doing a new little Tybee album too. I had all these tracks that were scratched out, and then I had that injury, so I like kind of took a break. And then I'm coming back. There's a few things that I just really wanted to retune my body so I could play them better. And but yeah, I'm still working on that. So it's going to be a second. I've just been in physical therapy. I'm not like disabled or anything. It's just like probably like 20% of my technique that I'm trying to get back. And it's like kind of specific stuff that I've just been working on, but it's coming back slowly.
Cool.
But so that will happen. And then the little Tybee stuff we're working on has been a process. COVID, we all have like different levels of comfort with meeting up and stuff like that. So it's been a challenge. We have a lot of tracks that are pretty much sketched out. We just need to get in the room, and really kind of talk. And it's interesting because this is, I feel like, the bedroom musician thing. It's like, it's really, I mean, I remember reading about Meshuggah sending tracks over dial-up, back in the day. And it's like that now, but it's like never meeting up. It definitely has a cost where you can go off in your own world, and if you spend a lot of time on something, then it's like you're going to be willing to justify it. So if someone else has a vision for something, and it's like they have a part and they have a string section in mind, and then you spend 20 hours on developing this kind of really specific technique that completely clashes with what they thought was going to happen. It's really hard to kind of develop the songs in a way that sounds good and is informed in an island, if we're all in separate islands working. So once we get, I think things are looking good. Georgia has been pretty bad with the numbers, but I think we're probably going to find like an outdoor practice space to really start to kind of plug back in. But we're also booking a European tour right now for February 2022. So cool. It's pretty cool to book a year in advance. It feels like it's so theoretical. Like it's like not.
Sure.
But who knows? I wonder. I feel like it's everyone seems pretty optimistic about next year. I don't think I'm really scared to try to think anything is going to happen this year. But I'm curious if stuff is going to be like very slow, timid, like getting back, or if it's going to be like everyone is so amped to come out. I don't know what to expect.
Yeah, it's interesting, man, because I have a friend of mine that's been out to India a couple times, and she just went back. And when I saw her, I was like, "Wait, so like you're going back? I mean, aren't you worried about like traveling so much?" And she's like, "Dude, she's like, India has reached herd immunity. Like everything's open." And I'm like, 1 billion people they got their lives back, and we're still sitting over here doing this thing. And she's like, "Yeah, man." It's like, I mean, it's not that they didn't have fallout, not that they didn't have issues, but her experience when she has been out in Mumbai, that they're, that was her experience. So I was like, okay. So who knows? I'm hoping for the best, honestly, like that we're able to quell the numbers and find kind of a balance between the people that are vaccinated and the herd immunity and the rest of the citizens. I don't know how, because it seems like there's enough people that are divided that won't or don't want to take it.
Yeah.
That we're going to have to kind of live with that unless unless we get some sort of totalitarian, mandatory thing.
Yeah. I saw, I think that we're going to be I don't know. I think we definitely need to be thinking about pandemics in the future, not this one, but the next one. And I know no one wants to hear about that, but there's a lot of scientists right now that are trying to figure out like what we can do. And I think it's going to become more common, and it's already becoming more common. The more global we become, the more, and I think a lot of it has to do with animals and humans in the same place, like diverse array of animals.
Right.
But yeah, there's a lot of pandemics or epidemics that were traced back to these tourist places where humans and animals interact, especially with bats. There was one place I saw, and it's like you walk through and bats literally like poop on you, like while you're there. It was like, I can't remember where it was at, but it's just such a funny image. Like, why are you going? Why is this a fun place that you want to visit? You like go, there's just like bats above you. And I guess it's cool to see like a wall of bats, but they're just like raining poop. And it's like, that is like such a fertile ground for virus transmission.
Brutal. Yeah, it's
But,
probably, I assume it's probably in China. I think I might have seen that same video.
maybe it was, I can't remember. Yeah. But yeah, I know a lot of scientists are trying to focus on like what we really can do. And I think we have to devote a lot of resources to it. And it's like, it's interesting how many people were kind of preaching that they were worried about a pandemic. It's funny, I read a few different like kind of pop science books from different scientists during the pandemic that were written before the pandemic. And it's like maybe 3 out of 5 books that I read, they all mention the fear of a pandemic. And like, that's their biggest fear from like their work in science or whatever. And it's just interesting how many prophetic voices there were telling us there's going to be some kind of SARS-like virus that is going to be maybe more lethal or definitely more contagious and take the world by storm. And it just happened. So it's like, I feel like we really have to put a lot of resources into preventative stuff. And I hope we can get the handshake back. I hope we can hug each other.
Yeah.
I miss that. I heard someone say it was like hugs are done and handshakes, no more handshakes for greeting. And I was like, man, that's gonna really hurt me if that's the case. I don't know. I've had sometimes I like see people with a mask on and I have this overwhelming feel to hug. And I'm like, and I'm like, really, really, I have to really wrestle with myself. And it feels wrong. Like, what do you do the elbow touch and it just, man, it's nothing. It feels like nothing. It's like,
I'm not going to let it stop me, man. I mean, obviously other people, to their comfort, but like,
yeah.
I've been selective. I'm not trying to be dangerous during these times, but like, I also got, I think, calculated risk is important at all times. And because like, look, we're not cars and cigarettes and beer and alcohol kill a fuck ton of people every year. And we're not really doing as much about that, there's always this calculated risk, right? And I think one has to live their life in the balance, and any of the number of things that you're doing day to day right now could kill you. Any number of things. You could slip and fall in the shower tomorrow, and that could snap your neck. I mean, there's all these strange things that we have calculated risk over. And I'm not interested in overt risk or throwing caution to the wind constantly. But when it comes to contact, I think that, we definitely need it. I know I do. And I can't just go indefinitely without hugs and closeness of other humans. It's just not going to work out. So.
Yeah, when I was in this movie bubble, we were tested every day. And then some days we were tested twice. But one of the times I got a positive, and I was sure that it was false because I was like, there's no way that I could have, like, there's just nothing that I've done. And there's all this policy that when you test positive, I took all these other tests right after and tested negative. But the way Georgia law is, you can't test out of a positive. So even if I have 5 after the fact, have 5 negatives, if I have 1 positive, then I still have to treat it as if I'm positive. So I had to be quarantined and all this stuff. But it was interesting because the Department of Health in Georgia, they call you, they ask you for names and stuff of everybody you saw. And it's such a thing where you rope in everybody into this thing. And I like, at some point I knew it was a false positive, and I don't even want to promote the fact that might be a common thing, but it did I was tested every day. There's just like 1,000 people that were tested every day, sometimes twice a day. It's just going to happen at some point. But, but interestingly, I was just thinking about, like, man, if I am the person that spread it to another person, and if there's even like, if there's a downstream death, I was like, I need to be fully transparent. Like, I don't know, at some point, part of me was like, felt like a narc or something, like, oh God, I'm going to call out these people. But then the other part of me was like, if I'm responsible for a death downstream, and that's where the word is for me. It's like, I'm really not worried about myself. If I haven't gotten it, if I got it, it wouldn't be the end of the world. I'm pretty sure that I'm like fairly healthy. I like exercise every day. But if I don't want to be anywhere in the causal chain of another person dying from it. So that's really where my concern 100% is. So it's like, yeah. And then there's a lot of stuff like neurological issues down the road, which are scary from an individual level. But at the same time, I don't know. I just think about my parents and my grandparents and stuff like that. And I don't want to do anything to like increase their risk. So I've been probably on the much safer side than the general population. And it's funny, my friend group, it's definitely strange to be really safe and then to have some people a little bit close to you that are not that strict, and then to see different degrees of strictness. I try to be not ultra judgmental. I mean, obviously I would, I don't know, I haven't really like called out people or anything like that, but like there's a local bar here that stayed open after the first lockdown, and it was like the people there, people would take pictures of them on the patio and like post it.
Oh, kind of outing them. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that stuff kind of works because people were like, that's like the COVID central bar. But I don't know. It's weird. But yeah, I think everyone has their own individual comfort level. I don't want to be responsible if I found out that I was the person that was like the link from another whole group of getting it or something, and then you found out one of their parents got it or something like that. Like I would just feel miserable. Like, so I'm trying to calculate that, but I'm not going to drive myself crazy. I'm just going to play music in my room.
Yeah, that's good, man. You got to do your thing, and like you sound like you have some outside, some nature that you can get involved in. Not everybody is privy that way. I have a lot. I have big neighborhoods here and big parks, 100 acres of park here, and a big chunk of it is all off leash dog parks. So me and the dog go roam around, and it's the interesting part is that the people that are out in the middle of nowhere wearing masks. Like I think it's like I'm not making fun of them. I think it's like it's a neurotic thing. It's like trying to be safe and trying to be careful, and then probably forgetting they have a mask on, and then walking out of the car and
I do that.
Going out on a trail, and it's like, it's okay to breathe the air. So out here, it's like we're good, but yeah, man. Well, I guess one of the other questions was that when I was out there in Atlanta, you and Brock told me about these really elaborate, cool ideas you had for the next Tybee album and the tour and all that stuff. And I'm not to ask you to divulge any of it, but is that still like coming along?
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of like lofty goals. And then, it seemed like a lot of uncertainty happened. But yeah, our writing process is so slow. So the COVID thing really did. There's like 6 of us, and like every new person, I guess it's just so much work to make sure all your parts work together, and then everyone has strong opinions, but it's definitely going to come. But yeah, a lot of stuff is interlocked with the release of it. But yeah, COVID happened, and we have all these songs, and we've done this in the past where we've written an album, and then some event happens, or we go on a tour and come back, and we realize that we want to change everything. But I'm pretty sure that all the songs that we have are going to be like pretty dramatically different than what we had before COVID. But once we get back in the room, I'm sure that it's going to like pop off. It's just right now it's like we're kind of taking some time, but I do think we're going to come back to it with new eyes. I think it's going to be pretty cool. But it's hard, the idea of releasing an album every 2 years or every year, like some people are able to do. I don't know. It's interesting because the quality over quantity, like I feel like that's a lofty goal and people want it. But social media, it's like TikTok, you're rewarded for quantity over quality. And it's like you're supposed to post 3 times a day and see what sticks. And a part of me enjoys that because I saw a TikTok the other day, and I actually am so inspired by some of the space of TikTok. It's like there's so much cool instructional content on there. But this person had this post, and it was just like, make shitty art. And it's like all these funny things. They're like pouring paint on their pants. They're like doing all of these really absurd things. And it's just like, make shitty art, make shitty art. And I always just remember my dad telling me when I was a kid, like, you're going to have to write a 1,000 bad songs before you write a good song. And just that idea of being able to put yourself out there and be vulnerable and make something that might not be your personal best or might not. I mean, I think that we want to have quality over quantity, and that's like a good goal. But in a lot of ways, we learn more if we're just putting stuff out there and we're seeing what works and we're seeing how people react. We're seeing how we like it. And a part of me wants to let go of some of that view of quality over quantity, because I know this album is going to take forever, and maybe afterwards, I don't know. I think about Miles Davis recording 3 albums in one day, and I just think about that. I think he did that to get out of a record contract. I think that's kind of a badass move.
Total badass move.
Yeah, I'm going to do all these in one day.
Here you go. I'm done. I'm out.
Yeah,
I like that because, well, so that speaks to the thought process in my head around not being too precious about what you create, right?
Yeah.
And, because it's too easy, especially nowadays where we have all these ways to capture. We can capture by video, by audio. Before long, you're gonna be able to capture the smell and package it. We're waiting for that one, smell-o-vision. But like the thought process around each time you capture something, then you analyze and you overanalyze. It's very easy to overanalyze the thing, and so there's less. It's seemingly, as a culture, there's less time spent just getting it done and doing a thing and having fun and tossing it out there, or letting it be one of the 1,000 things that are, I'm just learning right now. It's not that big of a deal, whether you share it publicly or not, so I can really appreciate the kind of getting away from a strict rule of quality over quantity, right? Because it, like in a sales sense, I mean, when I was young, I found that I could sell things, and I ended up selling Kirby vacuum cleaners door to door for a while.
Wow.
And
I could see you being good at that.
really difficult job, but for whatever reason, I got trained by somebody that was really good, and just my natural disposition lended itself. And like one of the things that you heard in those meetings all the time was just every time you hear no, say thanks and keep moving. Don't worry about it, because that no is one step closer to a yes. Right. So every time, and I thought, as much as I kind of disagree with the overall manipulative aspect of salesmanship, I've definitely distanced myself from that. But I really, that's just simple math. It's just called playing the numbers. That's just like, hey man, if you write 1,000 songs, you're bound to have one or two that are good. So write 1,000 songs.
Yeah. It's like the paradigm and the platform really do change things. But like with Instagram, I feel like it's a lot more insular. People have a curated feed of their friends or their people they like, and they're not necessarily going to the app to give them content. Where TikTok, everything is about that For You page. And like half the people on TikTok are looking at something that they don't follow. And it's like they just pick random people. I called it to give a glimmer of God, which is like they'll put you on the For You page for like, it's really weird. It's like, it's all marketing for them, because I got on the For You page like the other day and had like my first semi-big TikTok, and I don't have any notifications turned on my phone. I literally like keep all these apps, make them hard to get to, but I was on the app like all day because I had all this connection to make. And I was like, man, they're playing me hard right now. But I do appreciate the fact that it's like a general community, and it's like less of a bubble, because I'm having to interact on this like common feed rather than my own specific feed. And then also it's like they encourage duets. They really do encourage like collaboration in a way that Instagram doesn't. So that's like super cool seeing that. And then there's like authentic culture happening on TikTok, I feel like. And I think it's going to be like monetized and like see the same thing that happens to everything, where it's like people with money get involved, and then it becomes like this corporate version of itself. But it's like right now there's prison talk where people are doing tattoos in prisons. That is awesome to watch. And I feel like there's like really authentic like Cajun recipes from people, and it's like you can barely understand them talk. And it's like, but there's all these like really authentic glimpses into really unique stuff. And I feel like at some point it's going to be like people with money are going to be buying ads, and it's going to be like a lot of the real authentic culture is going to be lost. Like I think it did with Instagram. But at this point, it's pretty cool. I don't know until the next thing, but it is interesting that they do reward quantities specifically. So like you're just encouraged to post every day and see what sticks. And someone said that. So someone said, don't be so precious, just post a lot and see what happens. And that I don't like that from the sense that this is trying to get me addicted to this app. But I do like it because it was liberating. I'm like, wow, you're right. I have a bunch of videos that I wouldn't post otherwise, but now I'm going to see if it works. It's cool because then even if you don't get a blow up from it, like maybe you'll get a couple of thoughtful comments that will motivate you in a different direction or something like that. So.
Oh, I dig it. That's cool. I've only done one. I did. I just opened the account. I was just kind of like, it's probably just a platform. I'm not going to, I'm probably going to be addicted. I'm like, probably would get addicted to it. That's the thing. I'm already addicted to the other ones. And the little hits I get off of, interactions with people and my work makes me constantly looking for other influencers that might work well with the brand that I'm working with, and it's always kind of like, oh, are they in an agreement, or, maybe, hey, would you, and it's like, I'm always on the DMs, like looking like, are we going to be friends? Are we going to do something together or what? And, but as I got on there and I started flipping through, I was like, oh my God, this is an endless sea of craziness. And there's all these kind of fun ways to be involved with the app. So maybe I'll do a little bit more. Maybe I'll have some fun with it.
It's worth it. The best thing, I wouldn't ever advise this, except for in this instance, just to look on it for like 2 hours and just to get a feel for what's happening on there. And then you can kind of maybe piece together an idea of like what kind of content you might want to make. But just going on there and scrolling, it's actually really fun. I learned this with social media use. Like TikTok is super addictive. And if I'm supposed to be doing something else and I'm zoning out and I spend 2 hours of a vacuum of time that I don't even know past, I'll feel really bad about myself. However, if I work on something for a long time and I'm tired and I'm just like, I'm intentionally going to look at this now and do it for 30 minutes or whatever, then it's actually really cool. And it's like, wow, I see some interesting things and I enjoy it. But it's all about me contextualizing it. If I'm doing it to avoid something and I like and just obsessively looking, then it's like really bad. But if you intentionally look, and also if you're trying to do it for research, but you'll see some stuff that's pretty interesting. Like there's a kind of standard dance trend at TikTok, but there's like a whole like state space of TikTok where you can kind of like get to cute talk, and then you can go to like gay talk, and then you can go to helpful guitar talk, and then you can go to like, there's like lawyers on there talking about the law. There's
really?
like, there's people breaking down politics. There's a person I follow that literally tells you everyone in Congress's stock purchases. So it's really interesting. I saw this guy was like, Nancy Pelosi just bought $1 million in Tesla. So get ready for some policy. And then it's like the next day I was like, heard Biden was like, we're going to convert all of our government cars to electric cars. And I was like, damn, you can really maybe even like figure out policies of governments by just following their purchases. But
yeah, they're the ones they know.
Yeah, a lot of really cool information like that though is on there. But yeah, I definitely keep notifications not on. So like even if you tried to call me, you would not be able to get through. I just count on the fact that I look at my phone enough. I don't need to be notified of anything.
Yeah, I try to keep most of those off too. I have only just my regular basic notifications, nothing from any of the apps because I don't want to see that shit.
I actually got a stopwatch or just a freaking like pocket watch that's completely analog. Like,
oh yeah.
But I use it sometimes when I meditate. I've been following this one like yogi's meditation practice, but basically you just look at the second hand and you really try to not have any thoughts at all. Singular focused on the second hand, and then you try to see how long you can not have any thought. Anytime you get even a vague impression of a thought, then you start back over. But I have to do this because I was using my stopwatch on my phone, and the phone is so distracting and it's just blinding you. So I just needed some kind of analog timekeeping source. But yeah, I think healthy connections with our phone is like such a big topic, but I think a lot of people are learning how to do it. And they're also learning that the apps are like attention vampires and they monetize and leverage your data against you, all that. But there's a way to have a healthy viewpoint that's optimistic and willing to engage without being like so gullible or falling for it full force.
Right. It's like, can you be conscious? Can you know what you're up to? Can you see yourself straightforwardly and then and appropriately engage with the tool? Right. Versus like letting it run your situation. Yeah.
It's hard though.
Well, man, I want to ask you one last thing and then I'll start to wrap it up. But like, I'm curious as you've been in the pandemic and whatnot, have you found anything interesting that you've really been like freaked out about when you're listening to music and finding new artists and stuff? Because we'd love to hear some new music if you got something.
There's this person, Amelia Huff. She has a account. Her music, I think, is called Sienna Rose. It is spelled with I actually don't know how to spell it, but you can look up Amelia Huff. But she is dope. But she's doing microtonal stuff, and I'm really getting into the microtonal world because it's just the physics of sound and how it works. But one of the things that she kind of taught me is that you can use microtonality to expand consonants. It's not only about like making things sound weird and dissonant. It's about physical structures in the air of pressure, and that's what you're doing. And it's interesting because equal temperament, where we divide the scale evenly into 12 notes, it's like there's a huge compromise there, but also the kind of thing we were talking about with coherence and feeling kind of this flush harmony, where a structure is sound and whole number ratios are connected. Rather like equal temperament, it's like everything is a decimal place, and it's like if you were to play a major third, somehow see it in the air, if we could, it would look like a bad building. It would look like something that's not flush. But if you use the third that's in the harmonic series, that would be a part of just intonation. Or there's different thirds that you could possibly use, but you could have these whole number ratios, and the geometric structure that it would create in the air would be completely flush. It would be like kind of beautiful to be able to see it. But there's all kinds of fields of science. There's I forgot what it's called, but they put like sand on a metal plate, and you can kind of see it form around the waves of different vibrations. Mm-hmm. But yeah, she really kind of explores that, and she makes her own tuning systems using like prime numbers. And I can't even give it justice in my explanation. But she has a few a podcast that there's a podcast called Zen and Now, and it's like all about microtonal stuff. But I'm just getting into it. But it's amazing. It's like some of these people sound like they have like degrees in astrophysics or something, the way they talk about music. But I'm really interested because I have such a base in Western music theory, and then seeing this, it's like music theory, but it's all physics. It's like much less about the conventions of whatever, like 1800s, 18th century composers. It's much less about their like cultural norms, and much more about the physics of sound and just math. So it's really interesting for me to move in this direction. But it's wild. Like right now I have an expression pedal that can move me up like a quarter tone. So I can do these weird modulations outside of 12 tone equal temperament. But I'm going to get more and more into it, I'm sure. And I think that there's a lot of room, and I think maybe the West will have a brief kind of historical blip in equal temperament, 12 tone equal temperament. I think we're going to see music, especially after like lo-fi hip hop, all the warble, like warped vinyl sounds. That's all kind of using this kind of warped, like microtonal essence. And I think that you're going to see a lot more of that. You're going to see people geeking out over it because there's so much information to explore and understand that it is like once you put in all the work to learn it, it's like you're going to figure out a way to use it.
Yeah. No, that's super cool, man. I love that. And you said her name is Amelia Huff?
Yeah, Amelia Huff Huff. Okay.
And what would be the best place to find her to follow her on Instagram or TikTok?
I think she has a YouTube channel.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's let me see. I think it's like I think it's I want to say it's Z. It's like Ziana Rose.
It's crazy how much light your phone puts off on you.
Yeah, this is an iPad.
Yeah, it's like it's iPad. Okay.
Yeah, that's why.
That's extra bright then.
Yeah. Yeah, so you could just YouTube. There's a podcast. These videos pop up, but it's ZHEANNA, Erose, EROSE, and there's like a YouTube. She has a YouTube channel, but then this podcast that she did with Now and Zen, it's like you start to hear her talk, and you're like, I've listened to it like 5 times because I didn't understand it like the first time I heard it. But she has like a spiritual connection to the harmonic series, which is like what I've been talking about this whole time. But it's like the backbone of reality, this property where you have 2 fixed points and you have something vibrate, whether it's mechanical or electrical, and it doubles itself. You have the integer multiples. That's like how a string works. You know, it's like you have the harmonics, you have the halfway point, you have half of half, and you keep going. And that's how you get the harmonic series. That's how we built Western harmony. And all of that is involved in so much of our conscious experience, but it's so much more than just sound. But now they're saying that it's involved in our minds and how they work, maps on, and then things like consonance and dissonance might play a fundamental role in our conscious experiences and exotic states of consciousness, and feeling bad, feeling good, feeling bad, feeling a cluster headache or something like that might be a fundamental dissonance in the harmonics of these connectome of our brain. So I'm really interested in how all of these physical phenomena kind of connects all my interests together.
It's great, man. I love hearing you so passionate and excited about it too.
Yeah.
Definitely going to check out Amelia because that just seems like right up my alley. And I probably it'll help my YouTube suggestions too to go deep diving into that category, because I got like it was recommended to me by maybe Facebook or something, some sort of microtonal guitar video just this morning. Like I was like, and I was watching that this morning, and I'm like, and this dude has two different kinds of microtonal, like movable frets on a guitar. I'm like, what, dude? That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't sound good, or that won't sound good to the average person at first. It's like there might be a little bit of an entry fee, but there are some stuff that sounds so sick, and it's like it couldn't sound as good in equal temperament. So it does take a little bit of digging. I wrote it off. I feel like initially I'd be like, okay, well, I play a fretted instrument, I can't really change it. But now it's like I'm seeing there's all these different plugins that you can use. You can use a MIDI pickup and totally alter the like note, the ratio. There's an app, GeoShred. I think Jordan Rue does his app. You ever seen that? But you can tune every note. So I would do these things where I'm using neutral thirds, which are like in between major thirds and minor thirds. And they sound gnarly. It's like, it's new when you hear it. But I think that music, I mean, there's still a million places that music can go. But I think that that is such a ripe terrain for us. And I think that you're going to see a lot of it. But it's just beautiful because it's like real pressure structures in the air that are geometric and that are symmetrical. You know, it's like they are these rich interlocking harmonic structures. And in some ways that phenomena is a lot of how the universe works in general.
It's awesome. Yeah, I'm glad that you're doing this research and assimilating it into your approach on how you play and how you see and feel the music, man. It's that's inspiring to see you interact with it, you know. That's really cool.
I hope at some point to get the resonance breathing, to figure out my breath frequency and my heart rate, and then to have that reflected into like, to have like a synthesizer go and basically have the whole room be like one harmonic structure where like I have the sound and I could probably figure out like the standing wave, like that would resonate my actual walls. But there's probably a way to like meditate, have my breathing, have literally every aspect of my conscious experience be like together in like one unitary like field or something like that. I don't know. I'm going to work on it.
Dude, yeah, man, that's going to be awesome. Well, you got a lot of material probably through that process for this. I mean, you know, that's going to come up through like solo album for the new Tybee record and stuff like that. That'll be interesting to see where you take it, man.
Cool. Yeah.
Thank you so much, dude, for taking the time. It's been really great. I mean, it's every time we've ever hung out and talked, it's always been interesting, but we haven't talked in a while. So it's just kind of like, I'm just always hearting your stuff and trying to share it on the Kiesel page and stuff like that. And, I'm just so thankful for who you are in the world, man. It's like, it's really, it's really beautiful. And, not just as a musician, but just like as a human, and your interest, they interest me. And
cool, man. You too,
thanks, Josh.
Man. You too. I'm happy that you're doing this podcast, and we'll always support you for sure. When you said that you were a salesman and you're good at it, and just that being an artist rep and all that stuff, it's like it takes a unique kind of well-rounded person that's like really good at talking to people and listening and making them feel like heard. And it's just a unique skill that it requires a lot of depth emotionally to understand other people and make them feel good, you know? So I appreciate you for sure.
Thanks, man. Well, I like feeling good, and I like other people feeling good. It's a form of coherence, cohesion, and because when you have felt viscerally the discord of life, and then you start to see how you and your actions, your words, your intent play into that discord on a regular basis, and you start to connect it. You're like, wait, am I actually the one that's doing all this shit right now? Oh, wait a second, hold on. Let me slow this down. I'm not going to do 5 of those things because they all end up in that place. And, you know, and then just kind of shift it, you know, and hopefully you get a little better over time and you get seasoned. You get the sauce on the top. Wow.
Yeah, you get the sauce, the juice too.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much, Josh. I appreciate you, man. And hey, I love you, Josh.
All right, I love you too. Yeah, we can say that.
I'll talk to you real soon, man. Take care.
Yeah, awesome. I'll talk to you soon.